Morning. If memory serves me correctly, I made some promise yesterday that I'd begin each day with what I've called Priest in a Pandemic. And so this is the first of, I hope, what will be many. I say that now. But listen, let me ask you if you can remember who was the famous superhero who solved the problems of the world while sat on the loo. It's not the kind of question you get asked this time of the morning, but it's a good question. Who was the superhero who saved the world from the position of being sat on the loo? Well, of course, it was none other than the great Flush Gordon. Standing here this morning, it's like the whole world is looking for a superhero, isn't it, who's going to save us from this super virus. Unfortunately, Flush Gordon, like this loo, is otherwise engaged. Now, it's my loo, and I know it well. But standing here in this bleak and somewhat confined space, I'm reminded of those in our community whose worlds, whose opportunities and hopes are in the presence of shrinking rapidly and, frankly, without much warning. Access to precious and vulnerable family members and friends is now not possible because of self-isolation, infection and, sadly, even death. Travelling to a familiar place of work, receiving a salary for many is now in doubt, and maybe by the end of today, an impossibility. Buying basic commodities is made more difficult because of bulk buying, selfishness, and let's name it for what it is, pure greed. Access to places of beauty, sports clubs, the local pub, the library, the church, and other public spaces that offer company and hold our community together is now discouraged, if not impossible. And people speak of their self-isolation to me here in our own community as feeling as though they are suffocating, feeling as though they are squeezed and imprisoned. Now, whilst it's fair to say that some can shrug off 14 days of self-isolation as an opportunity to avoid the miserable March commute, get a bit more sleep, work from the comfort of their sofa and catch up on a box set, for hundreds of thousands across the country, isolation is not optional. It's inevitable. It's not a nuisance. It's frankly a living nightmare. You know, just this week I met a man in the village here who told me that he wasn't worried about the prospect of self-isolating, as he'd been self-isolating himself for the past 5 years. His poor mental health had made it impossible for him to step outside. No one ever knocked his door, apart from kids who then ran away. And whilst he said he'd not contracted a coronavirus, no one had shown him any interest, no one had bought him any meals, no one had offered to shop for him, post his mail, or even knock his door. Now, I am hopeful that as well as responding as we should to the very real challenges that face those who are self-isolating, this current pandemic will mean that support for isolated folk in our communities is not just for the moment, but will be for the future too. Let's hope that a resurgent and sustained sense of duty to look out for those who are genuinely vulnerable in our community will continue long after we're all vaccinated, long after we're well, and when the coronavirus becomes a subject in the national curriculum. You know, the promise of God to you and to me, if we're isolated to the point where our world has kind of shrunk, if we've lost or stand to lose a great deal, including our self-respect and our dignity, even our reason for living is reduced to the woeful size of this loo. If that is the case, to you God guarantees that faith in him will lead you to, says the psalmist, a larger and more spacious place. Faith in God will lead you to a larger and more spacious place. Now, I know that my trust in God is well placed. I believe that God's trust in me should be well placed too, as he calls me and others like me to do everything we can to make him possible in the darkness of days. Encouraging the kind of faith that says, dear problem, I've got a big God. Dear problem, I've got a big God. It's great to see churches being spiritually daring within the limits of social distancing, demonstrating the love of God and confirming the presence of Christ in our community through acts of unexpected kindness and selfless generosity. So forget about Flush Gordon. The greatest hero, superhero that you will ever need is Jesus. You know, unlike Flash Gordon as he hurtles through the air faster than a bullet en route to the next disaster, we've got no lightning bolts on our chests. We simply serve with Jesus in our hearts and our feet firmly on the ground, ready to respond to this disaster in his name. So that's my cue to flush, wash and go. But as I leave this smallest of rooms, I know that others will continue to live in the most reduced of circumstances. So let's go in the name of Christ and find them and make their world not just a better place, but a bigger one too. So go on, off you go. I'll just be a minute.